Well, hola, welcome everyone. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the Sotol industry. For us, the question for this panel is what is sustainability for the Sotol industry? And the idea is to talk a little bit about the better practices derived from regulation, from tradition, and the opportunity to build an industry for the future. First of all, we have to start with what Sotol is. Sotol is a plant that is native to the Chihuahuan desert in the northern part of Mexico. It's also a spirit that is made artisanally and that has been made for many generations. Now, if you think about this territory, the Chihuahuan desert, I want you to picture 2 times the size of Germany. That's where we are harvesting this plant in over 500,000 square kilometers of land. There's only 9 million people of us living in this land. So there's a lot of land and very little people. It is wild harvested, so we go out and find it where it grows naturally, and we harvest it from there. But in order to do that, we must have a permit to extract this sotol from it. And that is something I'm going to talk a little bit more in the future. And it is an artisanally made spirit. What does this mean? It means we cook it in a hole in the ground, we open ferment it in pine vats, and then we distill it in copper stills. That is the artisanal way of making sotol, very similar to other Mexican spirits as well, but unique to this territory of the Chihuahuan desert. And I guess the question is this sustainable? Well, it is sustainable in ways, but it's still very much a young industry, an industry that is still getting cues from other industries, from other categories on how to be sustainable. If we talk about sustainability, we might think sustainability is really for industries that have grown, created wealth, and now can focus back on production processes, packaging, techniques, well-being of their workers. For us, the Sotol industry gives us cues through regulation. As I mentioned before, Sotol is wild harvested. This means out there in this 500,000 square kilometers of land, in the desert, in the grasslands, in the mountains of Chihuahua, we need to go and find where Sotol grows naturally. And it's in very many places it grows naturally, but we need to go and find it, and then we need to make a study to determine how much Sotol is out there, how much of this Sotol we can actually take. And regulation, federal Mexican regulation, will only allow for 40% of mature plant to be extracted in a 5-year period. Now, bear with me a little bit on this one. I'm gonna try to explain. Think about if we made this research, discovered that there might be, let's say, 100 tons of Sotol available somewhere. That means that from those 100 tons, we are only allowed to take out 40 tons. And then from those 40 tons, we are only allowed to take one piece of it each year for 5 years. And the rule of thumb is after you harvest those 5 years, you cannot touch that land for another 10 years. Now, this regulation is meant to be sustainable. And for us, it's very important that we apply that regulation properly, because it means that we will be able to reharvest and replenish that inventory of Sotol, and hopefully that means that we will be able to make wild harvested Sotol for a long time. It's a challenge still. As you can imagine, bureaucracy and Mexican ways of doing things make it a little bit difficult, but also they give us an opportunity to actually be the ones that build that industry through regulation so that it's sustainable. Another part of what makes Sotol a little bit sustainable is tradition. Now, the traditional way of harvesting Sotol out in the wild requires us to take out the plant, but not take out the roots. We leave the rootstock on the ground, and if we leave a little bit of the green plant, if conditions are right, which in the desert, they're not always right, but if they are right, the plant will regrow. And that means a plant that maybe had taken 15, 20, 25 years to mature can now regrow in a period of 5 to 10 years. That allows us, again, to preserve the inventory of Sotol, allow it to grow again, and hopefully be able to harvest it again in a 10-year period. And the other part, imagine, again, 500,000 square kilometers. Go 8 hours into a dirt road, into a ranch in the desert where it's really difficult to extract that plant, and then put it on a semi-truck and bring it all the way to the distillery. Tradition says, let's do it the other way around. Let's bring the distillery to the plant, not the plant to the distillery. Traditionally, Chihuahua, the people in Chihuahua would take a still and a fermentation vat and go and set up camp by the plant, harvest it, cook it there, ferment it, and distill it, and then just go back with their liters of Sotol. That is something that we want to do as well. We want to look into how we can have mobile distilleries that actually go to these places and can create those spirits right there. We want to limit the impact of transporting all of that plant. And because Sotol, it's a low yielding plant, let's say 20 kilos per liter we will need. When we bring that semi with 30 tons, it means 1,500 liters of Sotol. Why can't we just make it where the plant grows, and maybe we can reduce that impact that bringing the plant to the distillery will be. And then innovation. We're in an industry that's still very young. Even though the tradition of making Sotol might be more than 300 years old, the industry itself is very, very young. We can start to plant Sotol. There are examples, and some of my friends here are already doing it, planting Sotol for the future. It's still unknown because the industry doesn't know how these plants are going to taste, what the yields are going to be. The research that has been done on this tells us that these plants might be ready in 7, 8, 10 years. But we don't know if they're going to have the right amount of sugars. We don't know what the flavor profile is going to be. We don't know if it's going to be sustainable. What we do know is that when we plant these plants, we will use only a fraction of the water that is used for other crops. And that if this industry starts to grow, this will mean for a lot of agriculture that we can change what we're doing to a more water friendly plant, one that doesn't require all that water. And as you can imagine, if you've ever been to the desert, think about where the water is. It's deep underground. You need to extract it. It's not out there. It's not flowing, not beautiful like here in Berlin. It's very dry, and we need that water to survive. We need that water for our crops, and hopefully Sotol can be a crop that many people can use for that. Also, as I mentioned before, innovating on the tradition with our mobile distilleries. This is a concept that we've been throwing around for the last couple of years. Hopefully we can build these distilleries because we will be moving all around this area, in Chihuahua, in Coahuila, and in Durango, looking for the plant. Hopefully we can latch a trailer to our trucks, bring the distillery to where the plant is growing, set up camp, and do it out there. One of the biggest challenges, or some of the challenges that are also in the Sotol industry, is sourcing. If you look at Chihuahua in a map, it's right in the middle of Mexico up north by the border with Texas and New Mexico and Arizona. It's in the middle of nowhere. I like to call it the desert island. It takes 5 hours driving to get out of the state. There's really not a lot of the resources that we need for our bottles. There's no bottles, there is no labels, there are no caps. Everything needs to come from outside. That is a big challenge for the industry today. We need to make it sustainable by creating the conditions in the industry so that we can have those packaging materials right where we're making the Sotol. That means that we need to organize as a category, because one brand, our brand, is not going to do it by itself. We need other brands to pitch in to become part of this ecosystem that wants to bring the packaging materials to where we're making them. We are focused very much on packaging, and that's why our bottles, much more like Juan Carlos, are made from recycled glass. We're also not too worried about if it has a little bubble here or there, if it's a little bit greener or browner. But we hope, and this is still very far from being sustainable, but we hope this will bring some sustainability to our packaging. Byproducts. As you know, with every distillation process, there are byproducts that we need to take care of. And in Sotol, it's so different. We have fibers, we have vinasse, we have the heating elements, and fibers can be used as a compost, as a biofuel, and even as adobe. Adobe is a building material typical of the Chihuahuan desert. We mix the earth with these fibers and we can build with them. A lot of the distilleries that we work with have been built with these adobes. And we're very hopeful that these fibers can then maybe in the future become packaging, become other things that we need, and we can reuse them. It could be used as a biofuel as well and compost for the agricultural industry. The vinasse that comes out of the distillation, we need to make sure that we dispose of it properly. It has a concentration of elements that can be damaging to the environment, so disposing of it means maybe using it as a fertilizer, but we can't use too much of it. So we need to neutralize it and then dispose of it. That is a challenge that is still ongoing on the industry and that will only grow as the industry grows. Finally, energy use. For us, reducing the energy use is very important. As you might imagine, with the process of distillation, we heat up those stills with firewood, sometimes with gas. We need to make sure that we source that firewood properly, and if we can, use even the byproducts, the fibers and other products, the choyaca, which is the central core of the plant. It's a fibrous, woody material that we can use to light up those stills. Hopefully that will become a trend, and then we can start doing some solar. Imagine in Chihuahua, we have 250 days of sun, and the sun burns. It burns really hard. So why don't we use that energy from the sun to create what we need for energy in our distilleries? If it's heating up the still or if it's lighting up for a 24-hour process, then we can use that sun as well and use those fibers as fuel and hopefully create a circular environment for our residue. So I guess the last question would be, how do we build an industry for the future? We are not now where we want to be. We want to be much more. We want to build an industry that grows and represents this Chihuahuan culture in a big way. We want to make sure that it means that generations after us will have the opportunity to keep doing what we're doing, to keep up the traditions that we learned from our fathers and they learned from their fathers. That means we need to build an industry, build it for the future. The first thing that we want to do is make sure that we organize the key stakeholders in the industry. And I think making great tasting Sotol, it's easier than organizing people. And I think that's the bigger challenge that we have. Going out there, finding the other Sotoleros and making sure that we get together to make a standard for the industry, going above and beyond what regulation states and making sure that we have a consensus of what that sustainable industry can look like. We need to invest in research. We have some research that has shown us that Sotol can be planted. Some other research has shown us how to better distill our product, but there's so much more that we don't know. This is something that's already being done by the universities in Chihuahua, but us as private enterprises, we need to invest in research and make sure that we know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And that only comes from being always on top of what you're doing and understanding through research what that means. We need to use technology. And this is a bit of a challenge because we want to keep Sotol artisanal. We believe in the artisanal Sotol because of the flavors that it brings out, because of the tradition that it represents. How do we use technology to improve on those processes without diminishing the artisanal result of our spirit? We focus on labor. We focus on how we can take the load off the people who work at the ranches and in the distilleries. People who are hardworking, but it's back-breaking work. And we have to make sure that there is technology that we can use to take that load off what they do. That is one of our main focuses because we want this to be an opportunity not only for them to grow, but for other people who might see an opportunity in the industry to come in, to learn the trade, to become part of the Sotol industry as a whole. And then we need to communicate adequately. We need to make sure that everybody in the industry and outside understand what the best practices for these are. And we might not know exactly what those practices are right now. Some we do, some we don't. But as we learn from those practices, we need to make sure that everybody knows so that they can implement them as well, so that they can learn to do this in the way that we as a community understand it to be better. For us, the biggest challenge, again, is organizing properly in a territory that's twice as big as Germany. That is a challenge in itself, but we believe in it. And if it takes us 30 years, then it will take us as long as we have to, but we will do it. That is our promise, and that is what we want to do. I want to thank you all for taking the opportunity to listen to me. Please follow our journey.